The vast emptiness of space stretched out in all directions, silent and cold. Inside a colossal ship, the Odyssey, the hum of machines and soft peeps echoed through the halls. It was a ship that had been drifting through the void for thousands of years, far from the Earth that humanity once called home. For 500,000 years, the humans aboard the Odyssey had been asleep, frozen in cryo sleep, their bodies suspended in time. They were the last survivors of Earth's final desperate war against alien invaders. Earth was lost, but humanity's last hope was to freeze their bodies and escape the galaxy in the hopes of one day waking up to a new world, a new chance to rebuild. But now, the time had come. A soft, mechanical voice echoed inside the ship's control room. Initiating cryo sleep cycle. Activation in 10, 9, 8. The countdown began. In one of the many cryo chambers, Captain Elias Kane slowly began to stir. His eyes fluttered open. The cold, glassy surface of the cryopod hissed as it opened, releasing a mist of frost into the air. His first breath was deep and sharp, like he was breathing in the unknown. His body felt stiff, weak from the long sleep. His mind, foggy from centuries of dormancy, tried to catch up. Earth, the war, the final exodus. He remembered the horror of watching his home planet fall, the terrible weapons, and the alien invaders that wiped out human civilization. The last orders were to escape, to survive. But now, they were awake. He looked around the cryo chamber, feeling the weight of the moment. He was the first. Elias blinked a few times, trying to focus. His body was sore, every muscle protesting as he lifted himself out of the pod. He glanced around, noticing the stillness of the room. He wasn't alone. Beside him, in the other cryopods, the other crew members of the Odyssey began to wake up. One by one, their pods opened, revealing the human survivors. His first officer, Dr. Lyra Asher, was the next to awaken. She stepped out of her pod with a quick, fluid motion, her eyes wide, scanning the room in confusion. She was a scientist, trained for the impossible, and even she seemed unsure of what to expect after such a long time. Elias staggered slightly, still disoriented, and looked up at the ship's control panel. He pressed a button, and the ship's ancient AI, Vanguard, came to life with a soft chime. "Captain Kane, Dr. Asher, welcome back," Vanguard said in a calm, mechanical voice. "The cryo sleep cycle has been completed. You and the crew have successfully awakened after 500,000 years." The AI's words sent a chill down Elias's spine. 500,000 years, a millennium had passed. How much had changed? How much had been forgotten? Elias forced his mind to focus. The mission, humanity's survival, the hope of returning to Earth, or what was left of it. He turned to Dr. Asher, his trusted second-in-command. "Lyra, we've been asleep for far too long. We need to find out where we are, what's left of the galaxy." Lyra's eyes were scanning the control panel as she stepped forward. "Vanguard, what's the status of the galaxy? How long have we been out?" Vanguard responded with a soft peep, bringing up an ancient star map on the screen. "The galaxy has changed considerably in your absence. The human colonies, Earth's homeworld, and most of your civilization have been lost to time. The invaders, known as the Zenith Order, took control of the galaxy shortly after your departure." Elias clenched his fists, anger rising within him. The Zenith Order. Those monstrous aliens who had destroyed everything. They were the reason humanity had been forced to escape in the first place. Now, they ruled the galaxy. "We have to find out if there's anything left of humanity," Elias muttered, determination in his voice. "We need to know what happened after we left." Lyra turned to him, her face serious. "What if Earth is gone? What if there's nothing left but dust?" Elias looked her in the eye, his voice unwavering. "We'll make sure humanity's legacy survives, no matter what." But there was no time for mourning the past, not yet. Elias and Lyra turned their attention to the ship's sensors. They needed to know where they were. Were there any signs of life? Were there any other survivors? The ship's systems hummed to life as Vanguard worked quickly to scan nearby star systems. The stars shone bright on the screen, but nothing was familiar. Elias noticed that the stars around them had shifted over the centuries. The galaxy had changed. Suddenly, a signal appeared on the ship's radar, a faint transmission. It wasn't a human signal, but it was coming from a nearby system. "Vanguard," Elias said, pointing to the screen. "What is this signal?" "Unidentified," Vanguard replied, displaying the message. It was an old transmission, one that seemed to carry the echoes of a lost time. "It appears to be from a time long past, perhaps before the fall of humanity." Lyra leaned closer. Could it be a remnant of the past? Maybe a beacon from Earth? Elias's heart raced. He didn't know if it was possible, but if that signal was from Earth, then there was hope. Hope that humanity wasn't completely lost. Hope that they could find some trace of their ancestors. "We have to investigate," Elias said, voice firm with resolve. "Prepare the crew. We're going to follow that signal." As the crew members slowly came to their senses, they began to gather in the control room. Though they had just woken from their long sleep, their training kicked in. There was no time to waste. The mission was still alive, and it was up to them to find out if humanity still had a future. Elias took a deep breath, staring at the map of stars before him. The galaxy was vast and unknown now. But one thing was clear: humanity wasn't done yet. "Let's get to work," he said, his voice full of authority. "The future of mankind is in our hands." The hum of the engines filled the ship as the Odyssey glided through the vast emptiness of space. Outside, the stars twinkled like ancient jewels, and the ship's sensors scanned everything in sight, trying to gather any clues about their new surroundings. For Elias Kane and the crew, everything was new. The galaxy they had once known was a distant memory, and the universe outside their ship had changed beyond recognition. They had been asleep for 500,000 years. An entire lifetime had passed since they left Earth, and nothing felt familiar. Elias stood at the front of the bridge, staring out the large window. It felt surreal. The ship's controls came to life, humming as Vanguard. The AI gave a status report. "Captain Kane, we are currently in the Ithian sector, located at the outer rim of the galaxy. This area is largely uncharted, and no human activity has been detected for millennia." Vanguard's voice echoed through the control room, sounding as calm and detached as ever. Elias ran a hand through his disheveled hair, trying to process the words. He had expected things to be different, but not like this. The galaxy was a place of mystery, not the home he had remembered. Humanity was a legend now, something that others would only speak of in whispers. Lyra Asher, his first officer, stood beside him, her face tense. She was clearly processing the same thoughts. "Where do we go from here?" Lyra asked, her voice low but steady. "We follow the signal," Elias replied, his eyes narrowing. "If there's a chance of finding out what happened to Earth, we have to take it." The crew had just begun to grasp the full scale of what was happening. Humanity's future was uncertain, and the signal from an unknown source was their only lead. The possibility that it could be a message from the remnants of Earth kept them all on edge. Their only goal was to find the answers, no matter the cost. The ship's engines thrummed as they began their journey toward the mysterious signal, which was now more than just a curiosity. It was their lifeline. As the ship moved deeper into space, the crew couldn't help but notice the changes that had occurred over the years. The stars were different, the constellations unfamiliar. It felt as though they were traveling through another galaxy entirely. As the hours passed, Elias and Lyra spent most of their time in the control room, watching the ship's scanners and keeping track of any potential threats. They had no idea what was out there, and the unknown was always a dangerous thing. Suddenly, a red warning light flashed on the control panel. It was a signal from an alien vessel, a ship of unknown origin, approaching their position at high speed. Elias stiffened, his hand reaching for the control panel. Vanguard. What is that? Unknown vessel, approaching at 10,000 kilometers per hour. No signs of human technology, Vanguard answered coolly. It appears to be an alien craft, armed and powered by advanced technology. Elias's heart began to race. He had prepared for the worst, but facing an unknown enemy so soon was not part of the plan. The ship had just woken up from centuries of sleep, and already they were being confronted by forces they couldn't comprehend. Should we engage? Lyra asked, her voice tense with the weight of the decision. No, Elias said, his mind racing. We don't know who they are, or if they're hostile. We need to gather information before we make any moves. The alien ship closed in, and soon enough, it appeared on the ship's visual screens. It was sleek, dark, and unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Its design was jagged, almost organic, with long tendrils extending from its hull. It gave off an eerie glow, like a predator silently circling its prey. The alien ship slowed, its engines humming with energy, and a communication signal was sent out. The message was a series of strange symbols and sounds, completely foreign to the humans aboard the Odyssey. Elias felt a knot form in his stomach. This was their first contact with an alien species in over 500,000 years. He knew that this moment could define humanity's future. Lyra, prepare to respond. Let's see if we can establish communication, he ordered, his voice calm but firm. Lyra quickly worked at the controls, trying to decipher the signal. After a tense moment, the alien message was translated. The voice was deep, almost mechanical, but it carried a hint of arrogance. You are not of this galaxy. Identify yourselves, or face annihilation. Elias didn't flinch. It was the same tone of hostility humanity had faced before, the kind of arrogance that came from beings who believed themselves superior. It wasn't unfamiliar. We are humans, Elias replied firmly. We come in peace. We mean no harm. The alien ship didn't respond right away, as if considering his words. Elias held his breath. They were still in the dark about who these beings were and how powerful they might be. After a long pause, the alien voice returned. Humans, you are a legend. We thought you extinct. Your kind has not been seen for eons. This changes things. Elias's heart skipped a beat. Humans were a legend. They were known across the galaxy, but not as a living species. They were considered a myth, something that the galaxy's current inhabitants had long forgotten, or so they thought. We have returned, Elias said, trying to sound confident, though the uncertainty of their situation weighed heavily on him. What is your name, and who are you? We are the Zenith Order. We are the rulers of this galaxy. You are the last of your kind, and you have no place here. However, you may be useful. The voice paused. We will allow you to live for now. But beware, humans. The galaxy has changed. The connection ended abruptly, and the alien ship began to move away. The Zenith Order. They had never heard of them before, but it was clear that these were powerful beings, and they were now aware that humanity had returned. Elias turned to Lyra, his mind racing. What do we do now? We don't know enough about them yet, she replied, her voice tense. But we can't let them intimidate us. We need to gather information. Fast. Elias nodded, his resolve strengthening. We keep moving toward the signal. If there's any chance we can find something from humanity's past, we need to know. With that decision made, the ship continued its journey into the unknown. The crew felt a mix of fear and determination as they navigated through this new galaxy. The Zenith Order was only the first of many unknowns that lay ahead. As the Odyssey moved deeper into the uncharted regions, the crew's hope began to grow. They still had a purpose, to find humanity's lost legacy. But they also knew they weren't alone anymore. The galaxy had changed, and so had humanity. They would need to adapt quickly, or risk being wiped out before they could even find their place in this new universe. Days turned into weeks as the ship traveled through the vast emptiness, but the signal remained steady, guiding them ever closer to their goal. It was becoming clear that the galaxy they had once known was no longer the same. The once great empires of Earth were nothing more than dust, scattered across time. But as long as humanity had a future, Elias and his crew would fight for it. Then, a breakthrough. The signal led them to a nearby star system, one that seemed to hold secrets. A planet, a remnant of what could have been humanity's future. It was time to find out. The journey had been long, but the crew of the Odyssey was beginning to feel the weight of the mission. As the ship sailed deeper into the unknown expanse, Elias Kane couldn't help but think about Earth. The planet they once called home. Was it still out there? Was it still capable of supporting life after all this time? There were no answers yet, but every turn of the ship's course brought them closer to a mystery that had haunted humanity for 500,000 years. The ship had just crossed into the orbit of the planet that the signal seemed to be coming from. A strange, faintly glowing orb. It was a world unlike anything Elias had ever seen. From the bridge, it looked like a jewel in the dark void, surrounded by a ring of debris. The planet itself was mostly covered in water, with small islands scattered across its surface. But it was what lay beneath the surface of the planet that intrigued Elias the most. "We're here," said Lyra Asher, his first officer. "What's our next move, Captain?" Elias stood tall, his hand resting on the control panel. "We approach with caution. We don't know what we're dealing with. Let's get closer and see if we can gather some data from the surface. We need to understand what's going on down there." The ship's thrusters hummed as the Odyssey moved closer to the planet. Every crew member was on edge, their eyes fixed on the screen, waiting for something to happen. They were all aware that they might be walking into a trap, or worse, something far more dangerous. As they approached the planet, Elias noticed something strange. A signal, much stronger now, was coming from deep beneath the surface, almost as if it were calling them. It wasn't just the faint radio signals from earlier. This was something far more advanced. The technology behind it was unmistakable. It was unmistakably human. A sudden burst of static broke into the room, and Vanguard, the ship's AI, spoke with urgency. "Captain Kane, incoming transmission from the planet. It is encoded. The source is human." The crew looked at each other, eyes wide. Human? Was it possible? How could there be humans here after all this time? They were supposed to be the last of their kind. "Patch it through," Elias said, his voice thick with anticipation. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a crackling voice broke through the static, sounding like it had been transmitted through an ancient system, one that hadn't been used in centuries. "This is Commander Sarah Westfield of the Earth Expeditionary Force. If you are receiving this message, then you are the last hope of humanity. Our world, our galaxy, it is lost." The voice faltered, and the crew waited in tense silence, trying to absorb the weight of what they were hearing. "We were sent here on a mission to colonize distant planets, but something went terribly wrong. The Zenith Order, they came. They attacked, they destroyed. We fought, but they were too powerful. Now we are scattered, and Earth is gone." The voice paused, a deep breath heard before it continued. "The only thing left now is our legacy. If you are hearing this, then you must continue the work. The fight is not over, and humanity's story is not finished." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving the crew in stunned silence. Elias stared at the screen, his heart racing. It was clear now. Humanity was not just extinct. Earth was gone, but the legacy of their people, their spirit, their strength, was still alive, somewhere out there in the galaxy. Lyra was the first to break the silence. "Commander Westfield, was she speaking for the last of the humans? How many more are out there?" Elias shook his head. "I don't know, but that message, it's a warning. The Zenith Order didn't just wipe out Earth. They destroyed everything humanity built. They couldn't have done it alone. We need to find out more. The crew began preparing for the landing. They didn't know what they would find, but they knew one thing for sure. They had to continue the mission. Earth may have been lost, but humanity's legacy had to be protected. As they descended toward the planet's surface, Ilias could feel the tension in the air. Every member of the crew was focused, their eyes fixed on the planet below. The landscape was eerily quiet. The oceans were still, the islands uninhabited, but the presence of human technology beneath the surface was undeniable. Vanguard's voice broke through the silence. "Captain, I detected several underground facilities. These may be the remains of human colonies. The technology readings are off the charts." Elias gripped the edge of his seat. "We've got to get to the surface. Let's find out what happened." The Odyssey touched down softly on the planet's surface, and the crew quickly disembarked, making their way through the dense, green jungle. The air was thick with humidity, but it carried the faintest scent of something familiar. It was almost like Earth, but not quite. The crew navigated through the jumble with ease, making their way toward the coordinates provided by the ship's scanners. The plants here were massive, some of them even glowing in the dim light. As they approached the location, they could see what looked like a large structure emerging from the jungle, tall, metallic, and clearly of human design. "This must be it," Lyra said, her voice full of awe. The entrance to the structure was sealed, but it wasn't locked. The door slid open with a soft hiss as they stepped inside. The inside of the facility was dark, but the lights flickered on as they walked deeper into the complex. It was clear that this place had been abandoned for centuries, but the technology remained remarkably advanced. As they made their way through the facility, they found rooms filled with holographic displays, research data, and old computer terminals. It was like walking through a time capsule, humanity's last efforts to survive after the destruction of Earth. In one of the main rooms, they found a large central database. The data was still intact, and Vanguard quickly accessed the system, downloading whatever information was available. "There's something here," Vanguard said, as if surprised by what it had uncovered. "It's a map, a star map. These coordinates, they lead to a hidden system in the far reaches of the galaxy." Elias's heart raced. Could this be the key to humanity's survival? "What else do you have?" Vanguard processed the data before responding. "It seems that Earth wasn't the only world targeted. Other human colonies were destroyed, but a few have managed to survive. These coordinates lead to a place where the last remnants of humanity are hiding." Lyra turned to Elias. "We've been given a chance. We can find them. We can rebuild." Elias nodded, his mind spinning with possibilities. This is humanity's second chance. We're not alone, and we're not finished. But we have a lot of work ahead of us. As the crew gathered around, it was clear that they were no longer just searching for answers. They were part of something much larger, a movement to reclaim humanity's place in the galaxy. The legacy of humanity was no longer a forgotten tale. It was alive, it was fighting, and it would endure. They had found a new mission, one that would carry them beyond the stars. The remnants of Earth may have been lost, but the spirit of humanity, that drive to survive and explore, was still burning bright. It was time for humanity to rise again. Elias looked out at the distant stars, the map now glowing on the screen. A new chapter was about to begin, and the journey ahead was filled with uncertainty. But there was hope, and that was enough. The news had spread like wildfire through the crew. After discovering the star map in the abandoned facility, Elias Kane and his team knew their next steps had to be strategic. They weren't just adventurers exploring new worlds anymore. They were the last hope for a broken and scattered humanity. The discovery that there were still pockets of human survivors across the galaxy was the spark they needed to fuel their mission. As the Odyssey orbited the strange, water-covered planet, Elias stared out the bridge window, lost in thought. The message from Commander Sarah Westfield had left him with more questions than answers. Earth was lost. The Zenith Order had wiped it out, but humanity had spread beyond the boundaries of their home world. Some had survived, and it was up to them to unite those survivors and strike back. Lyra Asher, his first officer, approached from behind. "Captain, we've completed a preliminary analysis of the star map. We've identified 3 major systems where survivors may be hiding. However, it won't be easy. These systems are far from each other, and each one is likely under the control of alien forces loyal to the Zenith Order." Elias nodded, turning to face her. "So, we'll need to act fast. If the Zenith Order hasn't destroyed them already, they will soon." Lyra gave a slight grimace. "Exactly. And we also have to consider the fact that these survivors may have been living in hiding for centuries. They may be weak, scattered, and unprepared for a fight. We don't have time to waste," Elias said, his voice determined. "We'll need to rally them. We need to show them that humanity isn't finished, that we are the last hope. But we also need to be smart. We don't want to make the same mistakes that led to Earth's fall." Elias turned to the rest of the bridge crew. "Prepare the ship. We leave immediately." As the Odyssey prepared to leave orbit, the atmosphere on board was tense but focused. The crew had a new sense of purpose. They weren't just explorers anymore. They were fighters. They were going to bring the fight to the Zenith Order, and they weren't going to do it alone. The journey to the first system on the star map was a long one. The stars around them seemed to blur as the ship jumped from one point in the galaxy to another. Days turned into weeks, and each passing moment felt heavier. Every crew member knew what was at stake. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. As they neared their destination, the crew began to prepare for the unknown. The ship's scanners picked up strange readings: an uninhabited moon, a barely functioning outpost. The survivors they were looking for weren't in plain sight. They were hiding, carefully keeping their distance from the dominant alien forces. "I'm picking up strange signals," said Vanguard, the ship's eye. "It's not like anything we've seen before. It appears to be a mix of old Earth technology and something more advanced." Elias stood up from his chair, a sense of urgency gripping him. "Can you triangulate the source of the signal? It's coming from the moon's surface. I'm attempting to isolate it. Give me a moment." Minutes passed in silence, each second adding to the mounting pressure. Then, Vanguard's voice cut through the tension. "I have it. The signal's origin is in the northern hemisphere of the moon, near a cluster of abandoned structures." "Good. Prepare to land the ship," Elias ordered. As the Odyssey descended toward the moon's surface, the crew couldn't help but notice the eerie stillness. The entire moon appeared to be lifeless, abandoned, a perfect hiding place for those who wanted to remain undetected by the Zenith Order. The landing was smooth. As the crew stepped out onto the barren surface, Elias could feel the weight of their mission bearing down on him. This place, this cold, desolate world, would either be their salvation or their downfall. The survivors they were about to meet would hold the key to humanity's future. "Stay alert," Elias instructed as they moved toward the cluster of structures. "We don't know who, or what, might be waiting for us." The structures they were heading toward looked old, but not ancient. They had been built using a combination of human technology and materials scavenged from nearby wreckage. It was clear that whoever lived here had been resourceful, doing everything they could to survive in the harsh conditions. As they approached the largest of the structures, the door opened with a loud hiss. Elias took the first step inside, followed by Lyra, Vanguard, and the rest of the team. The inside of the building was dark, with only the faint glow of dim lights illuminating the walls. The air was thick, but breathable. "Hello," Elias called out, his voice echoing in the silence. "Is anyone here?" A shadow moved in the distance, and within moments, a figure appeared. The person was dressed in a tattered uniform, clearly worn from years of use. Their face was hidden by a hood, but the figure stood tall, radiating strength despite their apparent exhaustion. "We've been waiting for you," the person said, their voice low and guarded. "You're the ones who found the signal, aren't you?" Elias stepped forward, his heart pounding. "Yes. We're from the Odyssey. We're here to help. We've come to unite humanity." The figure hesitated, their eyes narrowing as they sized up Elias. "Unite? Do you even know what you're asking? After everything that's happened, you think we can just go back to the way things were?" "I know it's hard," Elias said, his voice gentle. "But humanity can't survive if we stay divided. We can't fight the Zenith Order alone. But together, we stand a chance." The figure paused, clearly conflicted. Then, slowly, they removed their hood, revealing their face. A woman, her features worn but sharp, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "I'm Commander Elara. I lead a small group of survivors. We've been hiding here for centuries, living off scraps, avoiding the Zenith Order's notice. But you're right. We can't keep running." Elias's heart lifted. "You're not alone anymore, Commander. We've found more survivors. We can gather them. Fight back. We'll show the galaxy that humanity is still alive." Commander Elara looked at him with skepticism, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes. "And what do you expect us to do, after everything that's been lost?" "We rebuild," Elias said, his voice firm. "We fight back. We take back what's ours. We show the Zenith Order that humanity is not to be underestimated." For a moment, Elara didn't respond. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I'll help you, but we'll need more than just words. We'll need resources. We'll need allies." Elias smiled. "We'll get everything we need, and together, we'll be unstoppable." The rest of the survivors gathered in the outpost, a group of men and women, each one hardened by years of survival in hiding. They all looked at Elias and his crew with a mix of disbelief and cautious optimism. The past few centuries had broken humanity in ways they could barely comprehend. But here, in this forsaken place, they were beginning to hope again. Commander Elara introduced Elias to the rest of the survivors. They had their own stories of loss, of suffering, and of fighting to stay alive. But the most important thing was that they were still alive. "We can't do this alone," Elara said, addressing the group. "The Zenith Order is too powerful. We'll need to unite with others. We'll need to strike fast and hard. But we can't keep hiding forever." Elias stepped forward. "We're going to do more than hide. We're going to fight. We're going to rebuild humanity from the ashes. And we'll start by taking down the Zenith Order, one battle at a time." The room fell silent as the survivors considered his words. And for the first time in centuries, there was a spark of unity, a spark of hope. The fire of humanity's spirit had not been extinguished. It was alive, burning brighter than ever. "Let's begin," Elias said. "It's time for humanity to rise again." The moon's surface was silent, as if holding its breath. Elias and his team had just convinced the survivors here, on this remote world, to join their cause. Commander Elara and the small group of fighters he led were now on board the Odyssey, preparing to take the next step in their dangerous mission. But there was still one crucial part of the plan missing. It was the one thing that could turn the tide of war in their favor, the return of humanity's lost fleet. Elias stood on the bridge of the Odyssey, watching the stars stretch as the ship's engines hummed softly, preparing for their next journey. The mood was quiet but charged with anticipation. This was the moment they had been working toward, the moment they would set out to reclaim their past glory and fight back against the Zenith Order. But they knew the stakes. The lost fleet could be their only chance at defeating the overwhelming alien forces. "Captain, we've scanned the location you provided." Vanguard, the ship's AI, said, breaking the silence. "The fleet is still there, as expected. It's scattered across several sectors. But there's one crucial thing." Elias turned toward the eye's console. "What's that, Vanguard?" The fleet's ships were not just abandoned. They were intentionally hidden, locked away. The systems are in place to prevent anyone from accessing them. Only a select few know how to unlock them. Elias's heart sank. This wasn't going to be as easy as he hoped. He had already known that retrieving the fleet was going to be a monumental task. How long do we have? I estimate about 6 hours until the Zenith Order's patrols reach that sector. If we're going to make our move, we need to act fast, Vanguard replied, its voice unshaken. Elias nodded. The pressure of the mission weighed heavily on his shoulders. Prepare for immediate departure, he ordered. Lyra, rally the crew. I want everyone at their stations. We don't have time to waste. The journey to the fleet's location was fast, the ship jumping through the cold expanse of space. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as the crew focused on their task. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Inside the main hangar, Commander Ilara stood with her fighters, her team of survivors readying themselves for the battle ahead. The survivors they had gathered on the moon had their own ships and weapons, but their equipment was outdated, often scavenged from fallen enemies. Yet there was a fire in their eyes, an undeniable will to fight, to resist. They had survived for so long, hiding in the shadows, but they were ready for more. They were ready to rise. Elias, we're ready, Ilara said, walking into the bridge where he stood. She was in full combat gear, her rifle slung over her shoulder, her eyes determined. You don't have to do this alone. We'll back you up. Elias met her gaze. There was something comforting in her words, something that reassured him that they weren't just a scattered group anymore. They were a united force, stronger than ever. Thank you, Ilara. Your fighters will be critical in the upcoming battle. We're in this together, Ilara said with a small, confident smile. Let's go. When the Odyssey arrived at the fleet's last known location, the reality of their task set in. The fleet wasn't just 1 or 2 ships. It was a fleet of over 100 warships, spread out in a desolate sector of the galaxy. Some of them were intact, others were barely recognizable, wrecks from ancient battles. The fleet had been scattered across this part of space for centuries, hidden away, preserved for a time when humanity could rise again. Scanning the fleet now, Vanguard reported. There are several ships still intact. However, they are scattered across multiple debris fields. It's going to take us a while to gather them. Elias clenched his fists. Time was not a luxury they had. Do what you can, Vanguard. We'll need the ships operational, and we need them fast. Understood, Vanguard replied, and the ship began to scan each debris field. Meanwhile, on the deck of the Odyssey, Lyra coordinated with the rest of the crew, preparing the fighters for a mission. They needed to clear the debris fields, find the most intact ships, and then bring them on board. Ilara's fighters would lead the way, clearing the space around the fleet. As the Odyssey slowly moved between the scattered ships, Elias felt the weight of their mission. These ships represented more than just technology. They were symbols of humanity's past strength and a reminder of their potential future. If they could reclaim this fleet, they could stand against the Zenith Order. But if they failed, the galaxy would remain in the grip of their enemies forever. Suddenly, the sensors blared, warning of approaching ships. Captain, we've detected enemy patrols moving in fast, Vanguard announced. They'll be here in 15 minutes. We don't have that long, Elias muttered. Lyra, prepare our fighters. Ilara, ready your team. We need to move quickly. Ilara nodded. We'll be ready. The fighters launched into space, cutting through the debris field like a swarm of hornets. The moment they engaged, the battle began. The Zenith Order's patrol ships appeared out of nowhere, flanked by larger battleships. They were powerful, but they were slow, lumbering beasts compared to the quick, agile fighters that the Odyssey and the human fleet possessed. Elias could see the explosions in the distance as Ilara's team engaged the enemy. The Odyssey itself was a massive warship, but it moved with precision, navigating through the wreckage with ease. The crew worked in unison as they fended off wave after wave of enemies. The fighters cut through the sky like streaks of light, dodging laser fire and enemy missiles. The pressure mounted, but there was no turning back now. On the ground, Lyra's team prepared to board the first of the fleet's ships. The first ship they retrieved was the Sovereign, an older but heavily armed vessel with advanced weapon systems. It was a beast of a ship, one of the flagship vessels before the fleet was scattered. But it needed repairs. The damage from years of abandonment was severe. "Lyra, can you get it online?" Elias asked, watching as his team worked to power up the ship. "It'll take some time, but we've got the basics running," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the pressure. "We've managed to get the engines running, but we'll need to do a full systems check before it's battle-ready." "Good. Make it happen," Elias ordered, then turned his attention back to the battle outside. As the fight continued, Elias couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. Despite the odds, they were making progress. They were fighting back. The human fleet was returning to the galaxy, and with each ship they reclaimed, their power grew. "Captain, we've secured 2 more ships," Vanguard reported. "We'll have more within the next hour, but we're running low on time. The Zenith Order's reinforcements are on the way." "Understood," Elias said, his voice tight with urgency. "Get those ships online as quickly as possible." "Ilara, how are your teams holding up?" "We're keeping them busy, but they're bringing in more forces," Ilara responded. "We need those ships now." "We're working on it," Elias said. "Just hold them off as long as you can." The next few minutes felt like an eternity. The ships they were reclaiming were the lifeblood of their resistance. But the Zenith Order was relentless. Their patrols kept coming, more ships arriving to reinforce their forces. The pressure was on. There was no turning back. Then, just as it seemed the tide of battle was turning in favor of the enemy, a new wave of fighters appeared. This time, they weren't from the Zenith Order. They were humans, other survivors who had heard the call. The arrival of these ships was like a bolt of lightning, striking the enemy and throwing their ranks into disarray. The reinforcements had come at the perfect moment, and together they fought back against the invaders with renewed strength. "Captain, we've got backup," Vanguard said, a hint of relief in its voice. "Thank God," Elias muttered. "We can win this." Hours later, after fierce fighting, the Odyssey and the combined fleet had secured several ships, including the Sovereign, the Titan, and the Vanguard. These were no ordinary ships. They were battleships, weapons of mass destruction, pieces of the fleet that had once been humanity's pride. The battle wasn't over yet, but they had made their stand. Elias knew this was only the beginning. The Zenith Order had been pushed back, but they would regroup, sending more forces. They would never stop until humanity was gone. But for now, Elias allowed himself a moment to breathe. "Today, we made history," Ilara said as she walked up to Elias, her face bruised but smiling. "We reclaimed the fleet. We're not just surviving anymore. We're fighting back." Elias looked at the ships they had taken back and the survivors who had rallied to their cause. "This is only the beginning, Ilara. We'll keep fighting. And we'll win." The stars were silent once more, the only sound the steady hum of the Odyssey's engines as it drifted through the vast emptiness of space. Inside the ship, the crew was focused, every hand working together toward the same goal: humanity's redemption. The fleet they had reclaimed was small but mighty, and with it, they had the potential to finally stand against the Zenith Order, an empire that had crushed human resistance for centuries. Captain Elias stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the vastness of space before him. The fight was far from over, but they had gained something invaluable: momentum. The lost fleet, once a symbol of humanity's forgotten power, was now theirs to command. The ships that had lain dormant for millennia were waking up, their systems humming to life under the hands of skilled engineers and fighters. With each new ship they brought into the fold, they were growing stronger, more capable. Elias turned to face his crew. They had been through so much already, fighting, surviving, and reclaiming what was once lost. But now, they had a chance to do more than just survive. They had a chance to win. They had a chance to take back their future. Vanguard, Elias said, his voice firm. I want a full assessment of the fleet's readiness. Are we ready to move out? Vanguard's voice rang out, calm and analytical as always. The fleet is operational, Captain. The Sovereign, Titan, and Vanguard have been fully restored, and we have several smaller ships that are ready for combat. However, I recommend additional time for repairs and training before we engage the Zenith Order directly. Elias nodded, understanding the need for caution. The Zenith Order was not a force to be taken lightly, and even though they had reclaimed the fleet, they still had a long way to go. But they were no longer the underdogs. Now, they were a force to be reckoned with. I agree, Elias said, but we don't have forever. The Zenith Order is out there, and they will be coming for us. We need to move quickly. We'll make do with what we have and push forward. The next few days were filled with frantic activity. The engineers worked around the clock, repairing the ships and ensuring their systems were ready for battle. Meanwhile, the crew trained, honing their skills, and preparing for the fight ahead. Ilara and her fighters spent hours in the simulation room, perfecting their tactics and learning how to coordinate with the larger ships in the fleet. On the surface, things were calm, but underneath, there was an electric charge in the air. The survivors who had joined them were not just soldiers. They were families, communities, people who had long since given up hope of ever seeing the day when humanity could rise again. But now, with the fleet coming back online, and the Zenith Order reeling from their unexpected resistance, hope had returned. For the first time in a long time, it seemed like humanity might have a chance. One evening, as the crew gathered for a briefing, Elias addressed them, his voice resolute and strong. We've fought for years, hiding in the shadows, always on the defensive. But today, that changes. Today, we fight not just for survival, but for our future. The Zenith Order thinks we're weak. They think we're finished. But they're wrong. We have something they don't. We have each other. We have our will to survive, and we have the strength of humanity's greatest warriors at our backs. A cheer erupted from the crew, the tension in the room breaking as hope loomed once again. It was a small moment, but it was everything they needed. We will strike the first blow. Elias continued, his eyes scanning the room, locking gazes with each member of the crew. Our target will be their main shipyards. We'll cripple their ability to build and repair their fleets. If we can take them down, we can give the entire galaxy a chance. We don't just want revenge. We want our redemption. The plan was set. The first major attack against the Zenith Order would be swift and decisive. The fleet had gathered, and with it, a new sense of purpose. The ships were ready, the crews were prepared, and the survivors who had rallied to their side were ready to fight for the first time in years. Ilara's fighters led the way, slicing through space with deadly precision. The Odyssey, along with the other battleships, followed behind, engines flaring as they engaged their warp drives. It was a beautiful sight. The human fleet, once scattered and broken, now united under a single banner. They were a force again. The Zenith Order, however, was not blind to their movements. As the fleet moved toward the shipyards, they encountered resistance. A massive fleet of Zenith ships appeared from the shadows, ready to crush the human uprising before it could take root. This is it, Elias muttered, watching the enemy ships appear on the sensors. Prepare for battle, everyone. The sound of weapons charging filled the ship. The crew members scrambled to their positions, their movements swift and practiced. The time for hesitation was over. It was now or never. As the two fleets closed in on each other, the battle began. The first volley of fire came from the Zenith ships, massive beams of energy that slammed into the human fleet. The Odyssey rocked under the impact, but its shields held strong. Elias gritted his teeth, gripping the armrests of his command chair. Shields at 75%, Vanguard reported. We're holding, but they're relentless. Return fire, Elias ordered. Ilara, engage. Ilara's voice came through the comms, sharp and confident. "Roger that, Captain." "Fighters, engage." The human fleet retaliated with everything they had. Energy blasts, missiles, and even old-fashioned projectiles streaked through space, striking the Zenith ships with deadly precision. The battle was fierce, and the enemy was powerful, but the human fleet was fighting with a desperation and determination that the Zenith Order couldn't match. Outside the Odyssey, Alara's fighters tore through the enemy lines. They moved like a swarm of hornets, fast and deadly, outmaneuvering the larger, slower ships of the Zenith Order. It wasn't just about firepower, it was about strategy. And the humans had the advantage in that department. They fought with a unity born of necessity, their every move coordinated and precise. Elias watched the battle unfold on the bridge, his heart pounding. This was it. This was the moment that would define humanity's future. As the ships clashed, he could see the tide slowly turning in their favor. One by one, the Zenith ships were being destroyed or disabled, their massive war machines falling under the relentless assault of the human fleet. "We've breached their outer defenses," Vanguard said, a note of relief in its voice. "The shipyards are in range. All units, prepare for the final assault." Elias's heart raced as they moved closer to the target. The Zenith shipyards were a sprawling complex of massive docking stations, factories, and assembly lines, where the enemy's fleet was constantly being replenished. If they could destroy it, they could cripple the Zenith Order's ability to fight back. The final assault was swift. Alara's fighters took out the outer defenses, while the larger ships laid waste to the core of the shipyards. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as the Zenith's infrastructure crumbled under the human onslaught. The Zenith Order, caught off guard by the sheer ferocity of the attack, struggled to regroup. Their ships were falling one by one, and their once impenetrable shipyards were being reduced to rubble. "We did it," Alara said over the comms, her voice filled with awe. "The shipyards are gone." Elias allowed himself a moment of victory, but he knew there was no time to celebrate. The Zenith Order would regroup, and they would strike back. But for now, humanity had won a significant victory. The tide had turned. They were no longer the underdogs. They had proven that they could fight, that they could stand against the might of the Zenith Order and survive. As the human fleet regrouped and began to assess the damage, Elias stood on the bridge, looking out at the wreckage of the enemy ships and the destruction they had caused. There was still much to be done. The war was far from over, but this victory was a crucial turning point. Humanity had taken the first step toward redemption. They had shown the galaxy that they were not done yet, and they wouldn't be until they had won back their future. "We've earned our redemption," Elias said, his voice steady and strong. "But this is only the beginning. The Zenith Order may have lost today, but they will return. And when they do, we'll be ready." With those words, he turned to his crew, who were watching him with a mix of pride and determination. Humanity had a long road ahead, but for the first time in centuries, there was hope. They would fight, they would survive, and in the end, they would prevail.